There are moments in a courtroom that defy all precedent, moments that shatter the solemn decorum and leave an indelible mark on everyone who witnesses them. They are not born from brilliant legal arguments or shocking evidence, but from the raw, unfiltered truth of the human condition. On a Tuesday morning in the drab, wood-paneled chamber of the county family court, such a moment arrived not with a bang, but in the clear, unwavering voice of a 7-year-old girl. "I am my mother's lawyer," said Lily, her small frame almost swallowed by the cavernous space between the gallery and the judge's bench. She held a worn school folder, decorated with faded unicorn stickers, clutched to her chest like a shield. Her chin was held high, a gesture of defiance that seemed both heartbreakingly young and anciently resolute. The low hum of courtroom business, shuffling papers, whispered conversations, the clicking of keyboards, died instantly. A profound, absolute silence descended, so thick it felt physical. It was as if someone had hit the pause button on the world, freezing lawyers, clerks, and even the dust motes dancing in the shafts of morning light. Judge Samuel Harding, a man of 58 whose face was a roadmap of his 30 years on the bench, slowly removed his reading glasses. He polished them with a small cloth from his pocket, a deliberate, methodical action he used to buy himself time to process the incomprehensible. In 3 decades, he had seen bitter custody battles, perjured testimonies, and gut-wrenching family tragedies. He had seen seasoned attorneys crumble under pressure and hardened criminals weep, but he had never, not once, seen a child stand before him and declare herself as legal counsel. "I'm sorry, little one," he said. His voice, usually a stern baritone, softened with a gentle confusion. He assumed she was lost, a child who had wandered away from a parent waiting in the hallway. "But I think you're a little confused. This is a court of law. It's no place for games." He expected tears, or perhaps a shy retreat. He got neither. "I'm not playing, Your Honor," Lily replied. Her voice was steady, a stark contrast to the frantic hammering of her own heart against her ribs. She took a small, deliberate step forward. "I am here to represent my mother, Clara Evans, in custody case number 74295. My father, Mark Peterson, is attempting to gain custody of me under false pretenses, primarily for financial gain." If the initial silence was from shock, what followed was a tidal wave of disbelief. The courtroom erupted in a cacophony of murmurs. Lawyers who moments before were engrossed in their smartphones now stared, mouths agape. Clerks dropped their pens. The court reporter's fingers froze over her stenotype machine. Even the bailiff, a stoic man named Frank who had seen it all, took 2 steps forward from his post by the door, his face a mask of incredulity. From the petitioner's table on the right, a harsh, barking laugh cut through the noise. Mark Peterson, a handsome man of 42 whose expensive suit was tailored to project an image of success and authority, leaned back in his chair, shaking his head in amusement. "Your Honor, this is utterly ridiculous," he boomed, his voice dripping with condescension. "The girl is playing make-believe. We can't possibly waste the court's valuable time with this childish nonsense." Beside him, his attorney, Mr. Davies, shot to his feet. Davies was the physical embodiment of legal arrogance, a man of 50 with a perfectly coiffed silver mane, a $3,000 suit, and an air of supreme self-importance. "Your Honor, I must strenuously object," he declared, his voice resonating with practiced indignation. "This is a flagrant disrespect to the sanctity of this court and a mockery of legal procedure. I demand that the minor be removed from the courtroom immediately so that we may proceed with the serious business at hand." But Lily did not move. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She didn't look to her mother for support. Her brown eyes, large and luminous in her small face, remained fixed on Judge Harding, shining with a determination that simply did not belong to a 7-year-old. "Your Honor," she said, her voice cutting through the objections with surgical precision, "under the best interest of the child standard, which governs all custody proceedings in this state, the court is required to hear any and all testimony that pertains to my welfare. My own testimony and my perspective on my living situation is not only relevant, it is central to this case." The silence returned, deeper and more profound this time. It was the silence of collective shock. A child, no older than his own granddaughter, had just cited the single most important legal doctrine in family law. She hadn't just said the words, she had understood their application. Mr. Davies blinked several times, his well-rehearsed outrage deflating like a punctured balloon. He struggled to recalibrate. She memorized a few phrases from the internet, Your Honor, he stammered, grasping for a plausible explanation. Any kid with access to Google can do that these days. It's a coached performance. Then may I continue with my performance, counselor? Lily asked, turning to face him. The politeness in her tone was more disarming than any outburst could have been. Before Davies could formulate a response, she continued, her focus shifting back to the judge. The legal precedent in the landmark case of Johnson versus Johnson establishes that parental rights are not absolute. They are contingent upon the consistent fulfillment of parental duties, including providing emotional and financial support. My father, Mr. Peterson, failed in this fundamental duty when he willingly abandoned me for 3 consecutive years, with no contact and no support. The lawyer for the petitioner nearly choked on his own saliva. Mark Peterson's condescending smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of genuine alarm. Lily hadn't just memorized a phrase, she was building an argument. Furthermore, she pressed on, her voice gaining strength, the court typically grants sole custody to one parent when the other is found to be acting in a manner that is directly adverse to the child's best interests. Attempting to secure custody for the sole purpose of gaining control over a child's future inheritance would, I believe, qualify as such an adverse action. Judge Harding leaned forward, his elbows on the bench, his chin resting on his steepled fingers. He was utterly captivated. In 30 years, he had seen lawyers fumble with case law, misinterpret statutes, and struggle to form coherent arguments. He had never, ever seen a child lay out a legal framework with such devastating clarity. This was no longer a curiosity. It was a phenomenon. Moreover, Lily said, and with a small grunt of effort, she placed her unicorn folder on the counsel table in front of her. She opened it, revealing not crayon drawings, but a series of neatly labeled dividers. I have tangible evidence that proves my father's true intentions. She reached into the folder and pulled out an old, slightly battered smartphone, a device that seemed comically simple compared to the sophisticated legal jargon she was wielding. I managed to record a phone conversation in which he confesses, in his own words, that he only wants custody of me because of the $500,000 inheritance I am set to receive from my late grandfather. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. This was the moment the situation escalated from surreal to explosive. Mark Peterson's face turned a pasty, ashen white. Mr. Davies shot to his feet so fast that his expensive leather chair scraped loudly against the floor and tipped over with a crash. From the very back of the room, in the last row of public seating, a woman in a simple, clean blouse covered her face with her hands. A quiet, choked sob escaped her lips. It was Clara Evans, Lily's mother. "This is inadmissible," Davies shouted, his professional veneer completely shattered, revealing the raw panic beneath. "It's an illegal clandestine recording, a blatant violation of privacy. I demand it be stricken from the record and that this entire line of inquiry be dismissed." Lily looked at the flustered attorney with an expression of astonishing, unnerving calm. "Sir," she said, her voice even, "a recording is not considered illegal when it is made by a party to the conversation, which in this case was my father, in a state that operates under one-party consent wiretapping laws. Furthermore, there is legal precedent for admitting such evidence when it is presented to prevent a crime or a grave injustice, especially concerning the welfare of a minor. I was not recording a private citizen. I was documenting a plan to commit fraud upon this very court." The lawyer stood frozen, speechless. A 7-year-old girl had just, for the second time, schooled him on the law in his own area of expertise. He was outmaneuvered, out-argued, and utterly humiliated. "Your Honor," Lily said, turning back to the bench as if the interruption had been a minor nuisance. "May I play the recording for the court?" Judge Harding, still trying to fully process the scene unfolding before him, found his voice. He looked from the terrified face of Mark Peterson to the apoplectic attorney, and then to the small, determined girl. There was only one possible answer. "You may, Lily. You may." Lily's small fingers, surprisingly steady, tapped the screen of the old smartphone. For a moment there was only the faint hiss of static, a sound that seemed to amplify the suffocating tension in the room. Then a voice filled the courtroom. Mark Peterson's voice, but stripped of its courtroom polish, imbued with a casual, chilling cruelty. It was the voice of a man who believed he was speaking in private, a voice that revealed the rot beneath the expensive suit. Listen, Davies, the recorded voice began, sharp and impatient. I want custody of the girl, and I want it fast. I don't care what you have to invent. Just make it happen. The sound was clear, the words unequivocal. Judge Harding watched as Mark Peterson, the man sitting just a few feet away, seemed to shrink in his chair, his face a ghastly shade of pale. The recording was a ghost in the room, a spectral accuser that could not be cross-examined or intimidated. The kid is set to inherit a nice chunk of change from her grandfather when she turns 18. The voice continued, a greedy, conspiratorial edge creeping in. I'm talking $500,000 tax-free. If I have custody, I'm the one who manages that money. It's a golden ticket, Davies, and I'm not letting it slip away. A wave of revulsion rippled through the gallery. People who had come for their own mundane legal matters, divorces, traffic tickets, were now captive witnesses to this raw, ugly display of avarice. They shook their heads in silent, collective disgust. It was impossible to hear those words and not feel a surge of protective anger for the small girl standing so bravely at the front of the room. The recording continued, each word another nail in Mark Peterson's coffin. The mother doesn't know a thing about the inheritance. That woman can barely read a grocery list, let alone understand estate law. By the time she figures anything out, I'll have it all tied up in investments. My investments. A sharp, wounded cry came from the back of the courtroom. Clara Evans was now sobbing openly, her shoulders shaking. It wasn't just the plot to take her daughter that wounded her. It was the casual, venomous contempt in the voice of the man she had once loved, the man who was the father of her child. The words were a public stripping of her dignity, an assault on her intelligence and her worth. And then came the laugh. It was a short, cruel chuckle, the sound of a man utterly pleased with his own cleverness. It was the sound that had likely haunted Lily's nightmares for weeks. It made several people in the gallery mutter curses under their breath. So, we're agreed, the voice concluded. All business now. File for custody tomorrow. Claim the mother is unfit. Make something up. That she leaves the kid alone. That the apartment is a dump. That she's not involved in her schooling. You know the drill. Just paint a picture of a struggling, incompetent single mom, and we'll be golden. Lily paused the recording. The abrupt silence that followed was heavier, more damning than any sound could have been. She looked up at the judge, her expression solemn. Your Honor, this conversation was recorded on the afternoon of March 15th. 3 days later, on March 18th, my father officially filed his petition for custody, alleging those exact, fabricated claims. And she reached back into her unicorn folder and pulled out another set of documents, already marked as exhibits with small, handwritten sticky notes. Here is a copy of the petition filed by Mr. Davies on my father's behalf. As you will see, it claims, and I quote, "The mother's demanding work schedule frequently leaves the minor unsupervised for extended periods." It also claims, "The living environment is structurally inadequate and fails to meet the basic standards for a child's healthy development, and the child lacks proper academic and emotional support due to the mother's negligence." The judge took the documents, his face a grim mask. He scanned the pages, his eyes moving back and forth between the legal petition and the small girl who had just exposed it as a complete fabrication. "And are these allegations true, Lily?" he asked, his voice low and serious, though he already knew the answer. "They are all false, Your Honor," Lily said, her voice ringing with conviction. She began to lay out more papers on the counsel table, creating a small, organized fortress of truth. "And I have brought irrefutable evidence to prove it. First, let's address the claim of academic negligence." She slid a sheaf of papers across the table toward the clerk. "These are my official school report cards for the last 2 years. As you can see, I have maintained a 4.0 GPA. I am the top student in my class in every subject. This is not the record of a neglected child." The judge examined the documents, his eyebrows rising slightly. The grades were impressive, but it was the meticulous organization, the highlighting of key sections, the neat paper clips, the clear labels, that spoke volumes about the care and attention this child received. "Second," Lily continued, her rhythm steady, "this is a formal declaration from my school, signed by my principal. It confirms that I am never late, I am always well cared for, my clothes are clean, I am well fed, and that my mother, Clara Evans, has a perfect attendance record at all parent-teacher conferences and school events. She is a highly engaged parent." Mr. Davies, having recovered slightly from his earlier shock, saw a small opening and lunged for it. Your Honor, with all due respect, school documents can be influenced. A sympathetic teacher, a mother's pleading. These things are not always objective. Lily turned to him, her expression not of anger, but of disappointment. Are you accusing my teacher and my principal of committing perjury and falsifying official documents, sir? She asked, her voice quiet but carrying an immense weight. Because that is a very serious allegation. The lawyer backpedaled. I didn't say that, exactly, I merely suggested. Because if you are, Lily interrupted, her voice firm. I can call my teacher, Mrs. Miller, to testify under oath right now. She has taken time off work and is waiting in the hallway, should the court wish to hear from her. A slow smile spread across Judge Harding's face for the first time that day. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated admiration. Call your teacher, Counselor Lily. The courtroom door opened, and Sarah Miller walked in. She was a woman in her 40s with a kind face and intelligent eyes, dressed in a professional blouse and skirt. She looked nervous, but as soon as she saw Lily standing tall and composed, a wave of pride washed over her face, chasing the anxiety away. She approached the witness stand and was sworn in. Mrs. Miller, the judge began, you are Lily Evans's second-grade teacher? I am, Your Honor. Can you please describe for the court your observations regarding Lily's home life and her mother's involvement? I can, Mrs. Miller said, her voice clear and confident. She looked at Lily, then at the judge. I have known Lily and her mother for 2 years. In that time, Clara Evans has been nothing short of an exemplary parent. She works a difficult, demanding job, I know, but she has never once allowed it to interfere with Lily's well-being. The idea of her being negligent is, frankly, absurd. Is the child ever left unsupervised, to your knowledge? The judge asked. Never, Your Honor. Lily participates in the school's after-school program. When the program ends at 5 p.m., she comes to my classroom to do her homework while I finish my own work. Her mother, Clara, picks her up at 6 p.m. sharp every single day, without fail. She is always fed, her uniform is always clean, and her homework is always done. She is a model student and a joy to have in class. And what about the father, Mr. Peterson? What is his level of involvement in his daughter's school life? Mrs. Miller's gaze shifted to Mark Peterson, who was now actively trying to avoid her eyes, staring down at the table as if it held the secrets of the universe. In the 2 years I have been Lily's teacher, Your Honor, Mr. Peterson has appeared at the school exactly 0 times. He has never attended a parent-teacher conference. He has never called to ask about her progress. He has never participated in a school event. For all practical purposes, in the context of her education, he is a complete ghost. That's not true, Mark suddenly shouted, unable to bear the public indictment any longer. He shot up from his seat, his face red with anger and humiliation. I've always cared about my daughter. I love her. The courtroom fell silent. Lily turned slowly to face the man who had just professed his love. She crossed her small arms over her chest, adopting a posture of such startling maturity that it sent a fresh wave of shock through the room. You love me? She asked, her voice devoid of emotion. Okay, then tell me, Dad, what is my teacher's full name? What grade am I in? What is my favorite subject in school? What is my best friend's name? When is my birthday? A string of simple questions. The most basic facts any loving parent would know without a moment's thought. But for Mark Peterson, they were an impossible exam. He stood there, frozen, his mouth opening and closing silently like a fish out of water. He couldn't answer a single one. The silence stretched on, thick with his ignorance. I'll help you, Lily said finally, her voice flat and cold, a chilling sound coming from a 7-year-old. My teacher's name is Sarah Miller. I'm in the 2nd grade. My favorite subject is English because I love stories. My best friend's name is Julia, and we play on the swings every day at recess. And my birthday is September 12th. She paused, letting the weight of his failure settle over the room. You don't need to memorize those things, Dad. You need to live them. You need to be present. You need to actually love someone, not just say you do when you want something from them. The raw, painful silence that followed Lily's questioning of her father was a verdict in itself. Mark Peterson sank back into his chair, not just defeated, but exposed. The image of the powerful, concerned father he and his lawyer had tried to construct had been utterly demolished by 5 simple questions his own daughter knew he could not answer. The courtroom was no longer just a room of strangers. It was a collective witness to a profound and personal tragedy, the tragedy of a father who was a stranger to his own child. Judge Harding made a few notes. his pen scratching loudly in the quiet room. He looked at Lily, who had uncrossed her arms and was once again the picture of calm, focused composure. "You may continue, Lily," he said, his voice gentle. "Thank you, Your Honor," she replied, turning back to her unicorn folder. The contrast between the whimsical binder and its devastating contents was sharper than ever. "My father and his counsel have made claims about our living situation and my mother's financial instability. I would like to address those claims now." She pulled out a clear plastic sleeve containing several documents. "My father's petition states that we live in a cramped and insalubrious one-room dwelling. This is a deliberate misrepresentation." She handed a document to the clerk. "This is a floor plan of our apartment, provided by the building's management company. As you can see, it is a two-bedroom apartment with a living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It is 500 square feet. While modest, it is more than adequate for two people." Mr. Davies, attempting to regain some semblance of control, stood up, though more cautiously this time. "Your Honor, physical space is not the only measure of a suitable environment. The conditions within that space are what matter." "An excellent point, Counselor," Lily said, turning to him with an unnerving politeness. "Which is why I have also brought these." She produced a small stack of glossy photographs. "These are pictures of our home, taken last week. As you can see, we have proper furniture, a functioning refrigerator and stove, a television, and a dedicated study area where I do my homework every night." The photos were passed to the judge. They depicted a small, humble apartment, but one that was immaculately clean and organized. Every object seemed to have its place. There were handmade drawings taped to the refrigerator, a small vase of wildflowers on the kitchen table, and a bookshelf overflowing with children's books. It was not a home of wealth, but it was clearly a home filled with love and care. "This is the bedroom I share with my mother," Lily continued, pointing to one of the photos. "As you can see, there are two separate beds, a closet for our clothes, and my bookshelf. And that," she pointed to a small desk in the corner, "is where I learned every law I have cited today." Mark Peterson could no longer even look in his daughter's direction. He stared at his hands, his face a mask of shame, knowing that every word she spoke was the truth, and every lie he had told was being systematically and publicly unraveled. "My father also alleged that I am frequently left alone while my mother works," Lily said, consulting the petition again, as if it were a script she was determined to debunk, line by line. "This is again demonstrably false." She produced another paper-clipped set of documents. "I have already provided the statement from my school confirming I am there until 6 p.m. every day. After 6 p.m. my mother picks me up and we go home together. We have dinner. She helps me with any remaining homework. We watch a little television, and then we go to bed. I am never alone, Your Honor." "And what about on weekends?" Mr. Davies interjected, grasping at straws. "Or during school holidays?" Lily almost smiled. It was a fleeting, sad expression. "A very good question, Counselor. On weekends, my mother does not work her main job. We spend the entire time together. We go to the park, the grocery store, the library. She's teaching me how to cook. And during the summer and winter breaks, I stay with Mrs. Rodriguez, our next-door neighbor, while my mother is at work." "And who is this Mrs. Rodriguez?" the judge inquired. "Carmen Rodriguez," Lily answered immediately. "She's a retired nurse, 68 years old. She has lived in apartment 302 next to ours for 15 years. She is also here today and is willing to testify, if the court requires it." The judge scanned the gallery and saw a small, elderly woman with kind eyes and a neat floral dress give a small, supportive wave. "Ma'am, would you please approach the bench?" he asked. Carmen Rodriguez made her way to the front, leaning lightly on a cane, a proud smile on her face. After being sworn in, she stood tall. "Mrs. Rodriguez," the judge began, "you know the Evans family?" "I do, Your Honor, for 2 years now," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Clara is the hardest-working, most honest woman you will ever meet. And that little girl," she beamed at Lily, "is an angel. During the school holidays, she stays with me. We bake cookies, we watch her favorite shows, and she reads to me. She's the granddaughter I never had. Does the child cause any trouble?" Mrs. Rodriguez laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "Trouble? Good heavens, no. She helps me with everything. She does the dishes, organizes my pillbox for the week, and reads the newspaper to me because my eyesight isn't what it used to be. And the father, Mr. Peterson, do you ever see him?" The warmth vanished from Mrs. Rodriguez's face, replaced by a stern disapproval. In 2 years, Your Honor, I have seen that man exactly 3 times, and 2 of those times, it was only to argue with Clara about money. What kind of arguments? He'd show up out of the blue, demanding she loan him money, or he'd want to take Lily for a weekend, but only, I suspect, to show her off to some new girlfriend. But when that child was sick or actually needed something, he was a ghost. That's not true, Mark protested weakly from his seat. I always cared. Mrs. Rodriguez turned to him, her small frame radiating indignation. She pointed a trembling finger at him. You cared about nothing. When that child had pneumonia last year, who rushed her to the hospital at 2 a.m.? Her mother, who sat by her bedside for 3 days. Her mother. You didn't even know she was sick. I didn't know, Mark stammered. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. Mrs. Rodriguez shot back, her voice ringing with moral authority. Clara called you 5 times from the hospital. 5 times. You didn't answer a single call. Lily seized the moment, her transition seamless. Your Honor, that brings me to my father's next allegation, that I do not receive adequate medical care. I can prove this is also a lie. She pulled out a thick folder, this one labeled medical. Here are all of my medical records for the past 2 years. Pediatrician checkups every 6 months, dental appointments every 4 months, and a complete, up-to-date vaccination record. The judge leafed through the documents, his expression one of deep respect for the thoroughness of the preparation. And who pays for these appointments? My mother, Your Honor. She has a basic health insurance plan through her employer. And when I need a medication that isn't fully covered, she works extra shifts on the weekends to make up the difference. What kind of extra shifts? She cleans private homes on Saturdays and Sundays. She gets paid $50 per house. I have seen her clean 4 houses in a single Saturday just to afford my asthma inhaler. In the back of the room, Clara's quiet sobs were the only sound. They were tears of pain, but also of pride, hearing her daughter validate the silent sacrifices she had made, sacrifices she never thought anyone else would ever see or understand. Lily, meanwhile, continued, her gaze fixed on her father. My father has never contributed a single dollar to my medical expenses, not even when I was hospitalized with pneumonia. I told you I didn't know you were in the hospital, Mark protested, his voice cracking. You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Lily replied, her voice as cold and sharp as ice. My mother called you 7 times that day. You hung up on her twice. Mr. Davies, seeing the case slipping into an abyss, tried to change tactics. Your Honor, financial matters are important, but they are not the heart of a custody case. What truly matters is the emotional bond, the effective tie between a parent and child. The emotional bond? Lily repeated, turning to face him. You want to talk about the emotional bond, counselor? She pulled out another set of photos. These are from my last 2 birthday parties, my 6th and 7th birthdays. As you can see, the people present are my mother, Mrs. Rodriguez, my teacher, Mrs. Miller, and a few of my friends from school. The judge examined the photos. They depicted simple, homemade parties, but they were filled with joy. In each one, Lily was beaming, blowing out candles on a small cake, wrapped in her mother's loving embrace. And where is your father in these photos? The judge asked gently. He is in none of them, Your Honor, because he has never come to one of my birthday parties. Mark turned bright red. I had to work on your 6th birthday. You were at a steakhouse with your girlfriend, Lily stated, her voice flat and devoid of accusation. It was simply a fact. I saw the pictures she posted on Facebook, and on my 7th birthday, you were on vacation in Florida. I saw those pictures too. The public humiliation was complete. Mark Peterson could not rebut a single one of his daughter's claims because they were all, without exception, the truth. The air in the courtroom was thick with a mixture of sorrow and awe. The case was no longer about legal statutes or custody arrangements. It had become a profound examination of what it truly means to be a parent. Lily stood before them all, not as a victim, but as the chief narrator of her own life, a historian of her own abandonment. My father's lawyer speaks of an emotional bond, Lily continued, her voice resonating with a wisdom that belied her years. But a bond is not built on genetics, Your Honor. It is built on shared moments. It is built on presence. She reached into her unicorn folder one last time and pulled out a small spiral-bound notebook. It was a child's diary with a cartoon cat on the cover. This is my journal. I have been writing in it for 2 years. With the court's permission, I would like to read a few entries. You may, Judge Harding said, his voice barely a whisper. Lily opened the notebook to a page marked with a folded corner. September 15th, 2 years ago, 3 days after my birthday. Today is 3 days since I turned 6. Daddy didn't come to my party. Mommy said he was busy, but I saw her crying in the bathroom when she thought I was asleep. The simple, unadorned words of a child's diary were more powerful than any legal argument. They painted a picture of quiet heartbreak, of a little girl trying to make sense of a hurt she did not cause. October 23rd, she continued, her voice steady. Daddy came to the house today. He stayed for 30 minutes. He brought me a present, but it still had the price tag on it. I don't think he remembered which doll is my favorite. Several people in the gallery were now openly wiping tears from their eyes. December 12th. Daddy called today. He said he would pick me up to go to the park on Sunday. I waited for him from 2 o'clock until 6 o'clock. He never came. Mommy made up an excuse, but I know he just forgot. Mark Peterson could no longer bear it. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking in silent, racking sobs. Each word from the diary was a ghost of a promise he had broken, a memory of a disappointment he had inflicted. Should I continue, Your Honor? Lily asked softly. I have documented 15 separate instances of broken promises. 15. That won't be necessary, Lily, the judge said gently. We understand. Mr. Davies, in a final, desperate gambit, rose to his feet. Your Honor, children can be prone to exaggeration. They see things in black and white. Exaggeration? Lily turned to him, and for the first time, a flash of pure, righteous anger lit up her eyes. Counselor, do you have children? I do, he answered, taken aback. Have you ever forgotten their birthday? Never. Have you ever promised to take them somewhere and then simply not shown up? No. Have you ever gone months without seeing them? Of course not. Then do not speak to me of exaggeration, Lily said, her voice ringing with authority. You would not allow your children to endure what I have endured, yet you stand here and dismiss my pain as normal. It is not normal. It is neglect. The lawyer sat down, utterly defeated. A 7-year-old girl had just given him a master class in fatherhood and empathy. Your Honor, Lily said, turning back to the judge for her closing argument. Based on all the evidence presented, the recorded confession of intent to commit fraud, the school records, the medical documents, the photographic evidence of my home, the testimony of my teacher and my neighbor, and the documented history of emotional and financial abandonment, I request that my custody remain solely and exclusively with my mother, Clara Evans. Furthermore, she took a deep breath, I request that the court deny any and all future requests for visitation from the petitioner, Mark Peterson. I do not wish to be forced to have a relationship with someone who sees me as a financial instrument, not as a daughter. The final bombshell landed. It was one thing to deny custody. It was another, far more drastic step to sever all contact. You can't do that, Mark cried out, his voice muffled by his hands. I'm your father. You are my biological father, Lily replied, her voice devastatingly calm. My real parent is the person who raised me, who educated me, who loved me every single day. That person is my mother. She closed her unicorn folder with a quiet finality. That is all the evidence I have to present, Your Honor. Judge Harding was silent for a long, contemplative moment. He looked at the mountain of evidence, at the defeated father, and at the extraordinary child who had presented her case with more skill and integrity than most lawyers he knew. Lily, he said finally, your arguments are impeccable, your evidence is irrefutable, and your maturity is frankly astonishing. But before I render my decision, I have to ask one question that everyone in this room is thinking. How did you do this? How did a 7-year-old girl master family law with such precision? Lily allowed herself a small, sad smile. That's a long story, Your Honor. It started 3 weeks ago on a rainy Thursday afternoon when I overheard a phone call that changed my life forever. The entire courtroom leaned in. This was the final piece of the puzzle. I was in my room, playing, when I heard my father's voice. She began. He wasn't in the house, but he was on the phone with my mother's old cell, which she keeps as a backup. The speaker was on. He was talking to his lawyer. He was planning all of this. She recounted the moment she heard about the inheritance, the moment she heard him disparage her mother, the moment she heard him laugh. In that moment, Your Honor, I felt a rage I had never felt before. Not for me, but for my mother. How dare he talk about the woman who works 12 hours a day to give me everything, as if she were nothing. So I did something I saw in a detective movie, she confessed. I grabbed my mom's phone, hit record, and captured the rest of the conversation. When it was over, I ran to the bathroom and was sick. Not because I had a stomach ache, but because I had discovered my own father was a monster. She explained how she couldn't bear to break her mother's heart with the news, how she confided in her teacher, Mrs. Miller, the next day at school. The courtroom listened, spellbound, as she revealed the story's most incredible twist. Mrs. Miller listened to the whole story, and then she listened to the recording. She was horrified. But then she told me something that changed everything. She told me that before she became a teacher, she had gone to law school for 2 years. She never finished, because she had to work to support her family. But she knew the basics of family law. A murmur of understanding went through the room. She told me that while it was rare, there were provisions for a child's voice to be heard directly. She said I couldn't be an official lawyer, but I could present my own case. At first, I thought it was crazy. But then Mrs. Miller asked me a question. She asked, "Lily, what's more important, being afraid or protecting the person you love?" And I knew I had no choice. I had to fight. So that night, the three of us, me, my mom, and Mrs. Miller, we made a pact. We sat at our small kitchen table, which became our law office. For the next 3 weeks, every single day after school, and all day on weekends, we worked. Mrs. Miller brought her old law books. She taught me about custody, about parental duties, about evidence. She translated the complicated legal words into language I could understand. She would pretend to be my father's lawyer, and I would have to argue against her. We simulated this hearing more than 20 times. We organized every piece of evidence into the folders you see today. We prepared for every possible argument, every possible attack. The hardest part, Lily admitted, her voice dropping, was preparing to face my own father. Mrs. Miller warned me that he and his lawyer would try to make me feel small, to humiliate me. She taught me that when someone attacks you personally, it's because they can't attack your facts. She taught me that their anger would be my victory. The night before the hearing, she concluded, I was terrified, but my mother held my hand and told me that no matter what happened, she was already proud. She said that seeing her 7-year-old daughter rise up to defend their family was the greatest victory of her life, and that gave me the courage to walk in here today. She looked directly at the judge, her story complete. So that's how I did it, Your Honor. It wasn't because I'm a genius. It was because of 3 weeks of hard work, fueled by the love for my mother and the determination to protect her. I learned that when you have the truth on your side, and you know the laws that protect that truth, you can face anyone. Judge Samuel Harding took a deep, slow breath. He looked at the girl, then at her mother, who was weeping with pride, and at the teacher who had armed this small warrior for battle. He looked at the father, a broken man, undone by his own greed. He then stood up, a gesture he reserved only for the most significant of rulings. Cecilia. Lily, he corrected himself, his voice thick with emotion. In 30 years on this bench, I have seen many things, but I have never seen a more compelling, more righteous, or more powerful case presented. You are a living testament to the idea that justice is not about power or money. It is about truth, and the truth today is overwhelmingly clear. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. Therefore, based on the mountain of irrefutable evidence presented, and considering the clear, intelligent, and heartfelt wishes of the minor, this court rules as follows. Sole legal and physical custody of Lily Evans is hereby granted to her mother, Clara Evans. The petitioner's request is denied in its entirety. Furthermore, the court grants the minor's request to terminate all visitation rights. Mr. Peterson, you forfeited the right to be a father when you chose to treat your daughter as an asset. This court will not force her to endure your presence any longer. He brought the gavel down with a resounding crack. This hearing is adjourned. The courtroom erupted, not in murmurs but in applause. Strangers were clapping, court clerks were smiling, and even the bailiff, Frank, had a tear in his eye. Clara ran to the front and swept Lily into her arms, sobbing with a relief so profound it was almost painful. Mrs. Miller joined them, creating a small circle of victory and love. Lily had walked into the courtroom as a little girl with a unicorn folder. She walked out as a giant. Her story was not just about winning a case. It was about proving that the smallest voice, when armed with truth and fueled by love, can be the most powerful force in the world.